Moving along to something a little bit different, we're going to cover an action movie. We do cover action from time to time. We're going to discuss Bloodsport, which follows a man named Frank Dux, an American martial artist who decides to leave the army to compete in a martial arts tournament being held in Hong Kong. It is based on true events, so Frank Dux is a real person. I believe he was a undefeated champion. At the end of the movie, it does mention I think it's 329 matches, all undefeated. So yeah, I don't know how truthful the entire movie is, or how much of the true events are actually applied to it, but there's this one character in it, Chong Li. Is he a real person? I don't know. But he does make for quite a good villain for a martial arts movie. I think it's a good classic martial arts movie, one that I grew up watching quite a lot throughout my childhood, and even to this day. This and Kickboxer, they're the two best Van Damme movies in his career. The fighting in the movie, it's all good. I mean, we've got movies these days where people are bouncing off the walls, doing incredibly insane kicks, and it doesn't quite have that type of fighting in it. It's kind of more grounded, a little more realistic.
So I have a slightly different sort of origin of this. I had never actually seen this movie until I finished the movie for the first time about 15-25 minutes before we actually started this show tonight. I've of course heard about the movie, but it's kung fu movies, martial art movies, never been one of my things. I'm pretty well versed in horror movies, but once you get into any other genre, I pretty much have no idea what I'm talking about. Aside from the Karate Kid, it's quite possible I've never seen any other fighting-based movies. It's a movie that I was somewhat interested in, but it's not like high on my priority, hey, I have got to see this type movie. I'll say overall, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a pretty decent movie. Definitely high in action. I enjoyed most of the fighting sequences. I enjoyed most of the characters too. Now, small thing about the main character, Van Damme. I've actually, aside from Bloodsport, which I've of course now seen, I've only seen him in two other movies. One being a somewhat not great action movie from 1995 titled Sudden Death, and another one being, I believe it was from 2001, sort of a prison type movie titled In Hell, which was extraordinarily forgettable in my opinion. So I don't have much of a history with this type of movie, and I don't have much of a history with most of the actors. So I come from this from a sort of a new perspective of just watching it for the first time. And like I said, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Some really great characters. I especially enjoyed Jackson, played by Donald Gibb, was a really enjoyable character. I wish he got a few more fight scenes in, but I really enjoyed his character. And, I didn't care as much for the woman reporter, who I thought made some potentially idiotic mistakes throughout the movie. But generally speaking, I did enjoy this quite a bit.
With that Jackson character, and I know you don't really venture too much outside of the horror genre, before this movie, I was actually quite familiar with that actor based on a role that he played in Revenge of the Nerds. Have you ever seen that movie?
I actually got 20 minutes in and stopped watching.
Okay,
I have nothing against the movie. I think something else just came up and then I forgot to finish it. Usually if I start a movie, I finish it, but so I probably do not remember him much from that one.
Well, I mean, it's definitely one of the best 80s comedies out there, at least in my opinion. But
Police Academy, but that's okay.
Well, that too, but... So this Jackson character, he was in that movie, Revenge of the Nerds, and it's just so funny to see him from that movie, the character that he played there. He's like this over-the-top ogre football player who's, screaming nerds. He's got a lot of silly but funny scenes and that, and then you go from that to watching him fight in a martial arts tournament. It just, there's something funny about seeing that.
I thought his character had a lot of feeling too. The relationship between him and Dux's character, I thought they did really well. That's somewhat emotional scenes together, and I really sort of enjoyed the friendship they had.
Yeah. I just noticed you said Dux as just like that little Asian guy in the movie. It's like, that'll make you Frank Dux.
Speaking of which, I have to admit that guy sort of, I wasn't the biggest fan of that guy. He was a bit much, but he sort of grew on me throughout the movie.
Yeah, no, he's funny. There's a lot of like little funny moments in the movie.
Like anytime Forrest Whitaker was on screen with his sidekick, those are also fun chase scenes. So
Yeah. Well, speaking about those chase scenes, there's that one chase scene where they're chasing Van Damme through the city, and ultimately, they fall in the water.
yes,
From the boats, and I'm not sure if this video was a pioneer for it, but back in YouTube's earlier days, a lot of people would make Mentos commercials out of movie scenes and things like that. And the very first one that I saw was this chase scene from Bloodsport, and it's actually done really well. I don't know, maybe you should look it up on YouTube later, Bloodsport Mentos commercial, something like that, and watch it. It actually fits in really well. You're probably actually not too familiar with the original Mentos commercials, but usually someone would be in this silly situation, they need to get out of it, and they have one of these Mentos lollies, and suddenly they figure out some brilliant way to get out of it.
yeah, I have seen some pretty well done horror parodies of that. So probably made by you.
Actually, yeah, I have made a few. So, I think I've made one for Child's Play 3. I've made one for Kickboxer 2.
Silent Night, Deadly Night, was it?
Yeah, the Silent Night, Deadly Night one is actually probably the most realistic, or the one that's most similar to the original commercials.
Yeah, I would say the Child's Play 3 one always cracks me up when I see that. So well done.
Yeah. But yeah, just going back to Bloodsport, the music in the movie is actually quite good as well.
Yeah, it's worth saying. I also really like the music. I enjoyed quite a bit of 80s music, and it was, like you said, it's a bit cheesy, but I also enjoyed Karate Kid, and that also had some pretty cheesy music in it. So this isn't much different. One of them, I think it was called Fight to Survive, which is pretty epic sounding, and I thought it worked pretty well with the multiple fight scenes we got. And that's another thing I want to briefly mention. I do enjoy the variety of different fighting styles how these different characters had. We didn't really get to know much about many of them, but that one black guy who was always low to the ground, moving quickly, and that one big, almost sumo wrestler type guy. A lot of interesting fighting styles, and I sort of enjoyed the variety there.
And the lead villain, played by Bolo Young, he's quite menacing as well.
Yeah, actually, I sort of wondered, toward the end of the movie, when the final fight scene, when he threw that stuff in his eyes, is that cheating? Is that just...
It is.
Because it seemed like nobody reacted to that at all. I was
Well,
just sort of like, what are they doing? Like, they should probably stop the fight now? Like,
I think it's one of those things where it's easier to see in camera, but if you backed away and looked at it, like the way he throws it, he's throwing it like he's putting his arm out in an actual martial arts stance. So, and because the powder, it's more of a powder, so maybe it's a lot easier to see close up, but if you're a little further away, maybe it's not as easy to see. At the end of the day, it's a movie, so we kind of suspend our disbelief in whatever is happening. But I think it's one of those things where it's probably not as apparent in the moment because it's all slowed down. If it was in real time, these guys move really fast, so I don't think they would have noticed it as much as we noticed from watching as a movie with a slow motion scene.
I saw this movie, of course, I just saw it today, so these scenes might, be forgettable, but there were two scenes I really enjoyed in the movie. This after the God, what's the villain's name? Chong Li. Once he happens to kill someone during the fight, and there's just sort of a moment where everybody sort of has a silent respect prayer type for that guy, and there's just Chong Li in the background waving his arms in disrespect, which is such a dick move.
Yeah.
Like they really got a great guy to play Chong Li, and also the two what were they army officers who were sent to go collect Van Damme's character. They're trying to get him back home throughout the movie, and at the end, they're actually starting to get into the fights and really celebrating through the end, which especially the guy who was not Forrest Whitaker. the older guy once he started getting clapping for Van Damme. That was a sort of a smile, but I was sort of happy about that.
And just one other thing, like the earlier scenes where he's reminiscing about his childhood and the child actor that plays Van Damme's character is just kind of silly to watch, like the way his voice is. And...
Yeah, I'll be honest. During the whole flashback, I liked most of the training, but like the really early stuff, like who the hell is that guy supposed to be?
Yeah.
Like that just felt almost intentionally comedic to me. Like that was just sort of awkward, but the rest of the flashback is pretty okay.
Yeah. And one other thing that I have to wonder about, there is that one scene after Van Damme sleeps with that woman, and we get this shot of Van Damme and his ass. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, the demographic for this movie is clearly mostly male. So did they throw that in there to see if they could get more women to watch a movie, or is it just that they thought we would appreciate checking out his ass? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there might be the occasional gay guy who watches this, and he might be okay with it. I think what that probably was, it's a male-oriented movie, but I suspect a lot of guys brought their girlfriends to this movie when it came out back in the 80s, so they probably wanted to throw them a bone, and
Yeah.
what a bone they threw. So I see that was luckily it was a short scene, but that was sort of fun.
I bet you had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, I mean, like, he's, he looks good in the movie. I can't lie. I'm not gay or anything, but if someone said he had a nice tight ass, I'd have to agree.
I unfortunately have no comment to that. I'll just let anybody who listens to this choose what they want to think about those words.
Yeah. Someone's going to, like, isolate that 30 seconds of what I just said and then turn it into something else in their own YouTube video.
It might be me. So, yeah, and just a few notes about the reporting woman, Janice. I had some issues with the character. I like the idea, but when she's witnessing the fights and then she pulls out that recording device just to, I guess, go over what she's watching, I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's supposed to be some super secret event, and she's not being particularly secretive. She's a white woman. She's not being particularly secretive about what she's doing there.
I guess the thing is that, everyone's focused on the fight. No one's looking at her.
Yeah, even so, I feel like it was again, maybe I'm looking too much into it, but she did undercover things before, so it just seems like such an unnecessary risk, and we never find out what would have happened if they had found her there. I was sort of wondering if that would be a plot later on, but it never went that way. So that might have been interesting, but I just thought it was a small thing that I noticed.
There are actually quite a number of sequels to this movie, but I don't believe any of them include any of the characters from the original. Maybe Donald Gibb returns. I can't remember. I don't think he does, but it's been a long time since I've seen any of the sequels, and off the top of my head, none of them are any close to the originals. So,
yeah, and like I said, the thing with Jackson is such a fun character, and I just wish we saw him in, what was it, 2 fight scenes? I just wish there was a montage of fight scenes, and I just wish we saw him there once, but he didn't show up again, so that's somewhat disappointing. Though his final fight scene was appropriately traumatic, so kudos to that.
Yeah, so for me, Bloodsport's, like I said, one of those movies that I've just watched so many times throughout my life that I feel it's one of the most classic martial arts movies that you can see. The acting is what you'd expect out of a Canon Films movie. No one's winning any Oscars here, but it's a lot of dumb, cheesy fun. And for being based on a true story, I think it's quite an exciting thing to experience. It's got good music, a good villain, it's got good training sequences, and for me, it's about as good as it gets with martial arts films, outside of Kickboxer 2. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's one of Van Damme's best movies. The other movie that I would say of his that is just as good is the original Kickboxer movie. Yeah, I don't think he's ever been able to quite do anything as good as those two movies.
Yeah, so this is a movie, like I said, I only first saw today. I don't have much of a history with it. But it was for an action movie, it's decently enjoyable, if not deeply enjoyable. A lot of fun characters and fun chase scenes, pretty good fights, nothing too over the top, which I'm happy with. The fights mostly seem pretty realistic. I don't usually put that much thought into non-horror movies, so I'm not going to have some deep analysis, but I had quite a bit of fun watching it. And if you're into, martial arts flicks from the 80s, or if you're into Van Damme, you've probably already seen this, but, it's pretty much like the Karate Kid grown up, so it's definitely probably worth a watch, and I suspect a lot of people probably have found this one. I would probably give it 8, maybe a 9. I would go with a 9 out of 10. I don't have any big problems with the movie. Overall, it's pretty dang enjoyable.